Ashes of Creation is an upcoming sandbox MMORPG developed by Intrepid Studios. It is a game that many people are hailing as the savior of MMORPGs and he who shall bring down the evil reign of Blizzard. Now, I hope it does, as much as anyone else really. Unfortunately for me, I've experienced too many MMO releases to let this one slide without first raising my concerns, and there are a lot of concerns. So, I'm making this video in the hopes that I can quell your expectations and prepare you for what I believe to be simply one of many failures to come. But first, a short story. Wildstar was an upcoming sandbox MMORPG developed by Carbine Studios. It was a game that many people hailed as the savior of MMORPGs and he who shall bring back the good old days. It had action combat with skill shots, a lot of great PvE systems, polished character movement, and skill rotations. It had the best housing system in any MMORPG and arguably any game. You could go as far as to compare it with the best housing in the industry, tackling giants like Sims. The world was well developed, and it looked amazing with its animated art style that trumped all competition at the time, and looks good to this day. So then, what was the downfall of this amazing game? Nostalgia. This game was developed by people who had played many MMORPGs in their life. Whenever they talked about their game, you could see the pride they had in their prior accomplishments. These were memories they cherished, and it was through these memories that they decided to develop a game and what manner of game it would be. It was these memories that ruined Wildstar.
This disclaimer is hardcore. It's time to unleash raids. Oh, I'm sorry. For those who aren't hardcore, raids are when 20 to 40 lunatics rush headlong into a nightmarish scenario of pure carnage and impossible odds. Why? Because they're hardcore. Check it. Hardcore. We can achieve a level of complexity that you wouldn't believe. Hardcore. Whee! And we make sure that every big accomplishment, whether it's mini bosses, events, or challenges, comes with loot. And it looks good. Hardcore. So you think you're that special breed of crazy? Hardcore. The kind who drinks adrenaline for breakfast? Hardcore. You might want to check out our raids.
As you can probably deduce from the little montage you just saw, they like to think themselves hardcore gamers. Being a hardcore gamer has gotten more of an updated definition since the times when MMORPGs were at the top of the gaming industry. Beating Elden Ring at level 1 with fists is hardcore. Beating whatever this is makes you a hardcore gamer. This and this
Don't sweat the technique.
also makes you hardcore. It's also true that high tier rating makes you a hardcore gamer. What doesn't make you hardcore anymore is grinding and doing menial tasks for hundreds of hours. Players want grind to be a choice they make to grow in power, a choice they pursue in order to tackle on difficult foes. Preventing them from ever seeing a top enemy until they're fully geared up and prepared to face him is what kills the appeal of grind. It's amazing to kill a tough boss much earlier than you're supposed to and living within an inch of your life. It's also amazing to come back later when you're much stronger and destroy him. Both of these options are vital for an MMORPG. Now I want you to understand just how bad things were for Wildstar. So here's a quick guide on Wildstar's infamous raid attunement. And if you're wondering what this has to do with Ashes of Creation, worry not, we will get there. So first, you need to reach level 50 and accept the attunement quest. Then you need to acquire 150 Elder Gems. Elder Gems can only be earned at max level and are earned when a level 50 character earns 75,000 Elder Points, which are accumulated instead of experience points. Elder Gems can be earned by defeating raid and veteran bosses, as well as from quest rewards at level 50. Now, kill the elemental boss in Kelulgar. Obtain beloved level reputation with Dominion or Exile, 32,000 points of reputation. You reach level 50 with between 15,000 to 17,000 reputation, meaning you essentially have to level twice. You get rep by doing basic repetitive tasks in the same area. Now complete the Arkship Heist event. Obtain silver medals or higher for every adventure. You get a medal ranking for reaching the end of a dungeon in time, and you need to perform well enough for a silver medal, turning every single dungeon into a hardcore chase for gold medals. Complete the Mech Assault event in Farside. Obtain silver medals or higher for every veteran dungeon, which were quite hard and killed a lot of parties. Completed the Slugging It Out event in Mulgrave. Completed the Flight of Fancy event in Auroria. And kill all 10 world bosses, which were all in different areas around the map. Now I want you to know that when the game launched, Wildstar had only 4 dungeons and 4 raids. With this grind, they had essentially cut the game in half. While grinding and taking forever to level up sounds exciting to a hardcore MMO player, that's just a niche. It's not content that will entertain or serve 100% of a player base. It's not content that can sustain the average user. That's content that can only serve the type of person who's willing to spend almost a dozen hours every day to play your game just to keep up. They designed content for the type of players they used to be. But what the developers didn't realize was that they were a minority even within their own games. And they weren't even that good at the games. They just spent a lot of time in there. To give you an idea of what makes you hardcore in an MMO nowadays, I would point you towards the recent re-release of Classic. The first clear of Ragnaros was done by a guild wearing green gear, and they weren't even max level. Now that was cool to see. It essentially proved that all these old school hardcore MMO players were just full of shit. You didn't need to grind to be able to beat a boss, they just suck that much. The saddest thing about Wildstar is that if you remove its history and instead pretend that the game is launching now, it would still be the most exciting MMORPG to come, and it would still be hailed as a WoW killer. The game did everything that the MMO community claims it wants, and it did it right 1,000 times. The combat is fresh, the gameplay is polished, player housing is great, it has a lot of systems with a lot of depth that enhance the gameplay, and yet it's grindy, it's tedious, lacked in content, and even the content it did have was locked behind 1,000 attunement requirement. Fast forward to today. Ashes of Creation is coming. It's the next WoW killer. Yay! It promises great gameplay, great combat, and a lot of sandbox features for the players to enjoy. It also promises that it will have a long and meaningful leveling journey, that you will get to max level in 45 days if you play 4 to 6 hours a fucking day. That all of the endgame content will be difficult and you will need to group up and socialize. Huh, kinda reminds me of something. Now listen, I know that alone will not quench your thirst for Ashes of Creation, especially considering that if Wildstar didn't have its plug pulled so early, and they got the chance to rework their leveling and endgame, it would be a decent game at least. I'm here to break down why Ashes of Creation won't even get that far. You see, It's easy to let your imagination run through the best version of someone's promises and picture yourself exploring a well-made world. What is hard is actually thinking through all of someone's promises and seeing them all fall apart. And that's exactly what the rest of this video will consist of. I will take the core of Ashes of Creation's features and break them down into how they would actually play out, and you will see exactly how bad things really are. First, let's talk combat. This is by far the most important aspect of any game. If your combat sucks, then it's really hard to maintain the type of player base an MMO requires, especially one that is putting such a huge emphasis on player interaction and PvP. Ashes of Creation is gonna have 64 classes. Thing is, there's actually only 8 classes, each with their own slight alterations. The problem with the system is going to be balance. They are a new studio, and balance is something that even the most hardened and professional balance teams have yet to figure out properly when it comes to such variety. Most MMOs struggle with class choice. A lot of players will straight up quit if their class is that much worse than all of the competitors. In Ashes of Creation, this sort of problem is going to be way more fucked up to sort out. Think back to what I said about leveling. It takes 45 days to level up a class. That means if you made a poor choice, you are done. You will always be at a disadvantage, and it will take you more than a month to sort the problem out. All the while, you'll be playing a competitive economy game with open world combat. You'll make one bad choice, and you'll have to choose between being behind forever or keeping up but always being on the losing side of fights and duels. What's even worse is that they already confirmed they won't even bother balancing for 1v1. In the words of the man himself, the balance is going to have a rock, paper, scissors dynamic, where one class might have a straight advantage over another simply because it counters you. Just by this one choice, the whole idea of that cool election mechanic where you can fight in a tournament to decide the mayor is out of the window. You can't exactly be excited for a 1v1 duel when one of the guys just has a flat advantage over the other. It's also going to be dreadful for players who are out in the world farming, only to meet their counter in the open world and have few chances of success. The rock, paper, scissors dynamic simply doesn't function for the open world combat they're going for, and many other side features as well. That's just one problem with the combat. Another. Let's say that they solve the problem of balance by making sure each class has at least one variation of the 8 at your disposal that is actually viable. Well, now you went from 64 classes to only a handful that stand out. God forbid it actually becomes difficult to switch between your choices. People will be even more mad at that point. Add to that the issue of an endless talent system based around both your character and your weapons, 20 active skills per class you can choose out of 40, and you get more variety and options than World of Warcraft ever gave you. We've actually seen this exact problem in Guild Wars 2. The classes in there operate by a very similar idea, except instead of augments, you choose your spells based on your weapon. Each weapon gives you a unique set of 5 skills based on the class you chose, and you get to choose 2 weapons. Ultimately, it adds up to a lot of classes and a lot of work that doesn't pay out, because at the end of the day, you'll have the same basic rotation for the remainder of the game. The classes in Guild Wars 2 never went anywhere interesting, and they were unbalanced. All that for the sake of a huge amount of variety. Variety works in games like League of Legends and Dota 2 because you just start the game and try out a new character. In MMOs, you have to level a class for hundreds of hours, and most people don't have that level of commitment. If they see a hard imbalance, they're likely to just quit your game. To give you an idea of how bad the Guild Wars 2 classes were, the recent Ranger showcase was already better than the Guild Wars 2 Ranger. Now I want to focus on what I believe to be one of the most important things in an MMORPG. What makes an MMORPG fun? Because the class design can only keep you entertained for so long. Eventually you get used to it and you'll need something to freshen it up. So how does MMO gameplay get spiced up throughout an expansion? We're talking 2 years playing the same game. Well, the way you spice it up is by not making the classes the main attraction. A class is only the tool you choose. What truly defines the gameplay of this genre is the same thing that defines many other genres. It's the bosses. The way adventure games work is you're given a kit to do the things that you're meant to do. But what brings out the beauty in your kit is the way you apply it against a tough foe. One that has many tools at his disposal and has the ability to bring out all the new ones in yours. A good boss has a lot of mechanics that make sense and are easy for a player to read. If it's easy to read, it's fun. Because it can be as hard as you want, but as long as the player knows what to do, then it's still fun. Dark Souls is a perfect example because they give you a very simple kit. The answer to everything that the boss does, no matter how insane it might be. Just dodge, dumbass. And that makes it fun. Because now the entire game is tailored around how cool the bosses are, and all you do is pay attention to the bosses. You dodge the boss's attacks, you dance with them, you run away from them, you find tiny windows where you can toss in an attack just to see the boss spaz out on you. But if you were to just take the basic kit from a Dark Souls game, or a Souls-like in general, then your kit would be empty as shit. You can do nothing. You get one bloody attack. Imagine doing that one attack for hundreds of hours on end. Imagine what the grind would feel like. That would be tedious. That would make for a dog shit game. That is how you get New World. If New World cut its world in half and its systems in half and redirected those resources in having some raids and 10 more dungeons, we'd all be playing New World right now. The point is, good, complex bosses make a game, especially an MMORPG. It's actually the bosses themselves that forge the best lore and the best world areas around them, not the other way around. To give you an example, Lost Ark had to reset its endgame 2 times and add in different types of content just to see that the only content that made players come back were the Legion raids with the massive, extremely detailed and difficult bosses. And if we're taking a bit of a look at Alpha 1, there just isn't anything there. And you might say, yeah, it's an alpha. But keep in mind, this game is taking inspiration from Guild Wars 2, and is taking inspiration from Archage, and from what I understand, a bit of Lineage 2 as well, EverQuest, Star Wars Online. What did these games have in common? Dogshit boss design. Like absolutely horrendous boss design. I'm talking, thing is a stat stick at best, and having you sit there and watch it doing nothing at worst. You'll see a boss fly off and start shooting shit at you, and the only thing you can do is sit there as the healers give you heals. And that's half the boss fight. Now I want to show you something. I was actually listening to the developers talk about their favorite bosses, and they were saying that this boss fight right here that I'm showing you on screen is one of their favorite bosses. It's one of their favorite, my man.
What are some of your guys' favorite raids that you've been in the past in other games?
Ooh.
I think my favorite was probably like Valakas or Antharas and Lineage 2.
Antharas was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's like a 4-hour, 5-hour long raid, and you lost like 6
Yeah.
levels that took you a month to get back.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my favorite is the Arcade Red Dragon, where you can PvP as well.
Look at this pathetic dragon. He's doing nothing. He's sitting there doing nothing for half the bloody boss fight. How is this your favorite boss fight? Have you played any goddamn games in the last 10 years? I'd feel more in danger fighting a lizard on the side of the street in Australia.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was pretty fun. I liked the little the harpoon mechanic.
He likes the harpoon mechanic. Man, if I see that shit in the game, I'm uninstalling right then and there. Clicking an icon and designing some slow-ass projectiles is no substitute for boss mechanics.
I have a confession.
Uh-oh.
I've never done a raid.
What?
What?
Nope, I
lying.
only did dungeon bosses.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I'm looking at one of the dragons. Well, what was your favorite dungeon boss?
In recent memory, the new WoW expansion had a pretty cool boss fight in one of the covenants. I can't remember which one, the vampire one. I don't remember what the name of the raid was, or not raid, dungeon was. But it had this cool boss that would like throw you off a tower, and you'd have to like fight mobs to get back to the fight.
That's pretty cool.
Just to cement my point, I want to show you the standards for boss fights in 2022. Have at it.
まあ、私のセフレにはギリかなわないかな。でもこれ、まだマックスじゃないけどね。そこまで言うなら、もっと大きくしてみようぜ。こんな。
Smoking sexy stuff! I am the storm that is approaching.
And there's another glaring issue. Open world, quote-unquote, dungeons. From everything we've seen in Alpha 1 and everything they've been saying, these open world dungeons are kind of horrible. They just don't offer a worthwhile experience that can bear the name of a dungeon. They're more like areas with elite mobs in World of Warcraft, very similar to Stormguard Keep in Arathi Highlands. Needless to say, I don't think I need to remind anyone just how much that place sucked. But just to give you a quick refresher, you would go in, the mods would nearly kick your ass because they're elites and easy to pull by mistake, and then another group from the enemy faction came, they would kill you, and you wouldn't be able to fight back because you're already fighting mobs, essentially making it so you'd be dead by default. Then you'd come back and kill them, and the enemy won't be able to return fire, creating this tedious back and forth as neither of the groups would be able to complete their quests for hours. From an outside perspective, you saw motivation for PvP. From an inside perspective, you were just tediously killing each other to keep the quest mobs alive. There's no reason to reinvent the dungeon formula. People like dungeons. Having more dungeons is great. Why is it that every time an MMORPG comes out that isn't pay to win, we're going back 10 years in terms of technology, 20 years? Then a game like Lost Ark comes out, and the gameplay is amazing compared to what all these nostalgia-obsessed people tell you to play, and the community wonders why we give pay-to-win games the time of day. You think I want to play a pay-to-win piece of shit? No, I don't. But my priority with video games is to have fun. I want to have fun, not run around like a retard for 30 minutes pretending that staring at textures or clicking on plant or rock textures is an enjoyable way to pass the time. Don't even get me started on the map. GTA 5. Pretty big game, right? How big do you think the map is in kilometers? And answer honestly. Okay, whatever you said was actually wrong. They give you an exact number. That number is 75.84 square kilometers. Size of classic Azeroth? 114 square kilometers. Now, how big did they say the Ashes of Creation map will be? 1400 square kilometers. Why? Even the servers. In WoW, the servers cap at 5,000 to 6,000 players. In Ashes, they increase server capacity to 10,000 players, but the map is more than 10 times the size. World of Warcraft already feels empty. Can you imagine what Ashes would be like? To end this video off, I want to say this. I don't hate Ashes of Creation. Some of the things they're doing show great promise. But some other things are so bad they might risk sabotaging the game entirely. Can you imagine what bug fixing across a 1400 square kilometer map would be like? How long that would take? Can you imagine how long it would take to polish and bug fix 64 classes and their different types of movement across that size of map? Can you imagine the pathing issues for enemies? The ways you can abuse the AI through that size of a map? It's just not worth it. To create that big of a game right off the bat is pure sabotage. Take it slower. The magic of an MMORPG is that it evolves over time. You can make the map of that size eventually. It doesn't have to be like that on release. What people want on release is to have a proper, functional game regardless of its size. We don't need 16 times the detail, 4 times the size. What we need is a good, functional game. And I know you have every intention of delivering that. So please look at the history of the games behind you and learn their lessons. Focus your project up into a good foundation before you move on to a greater size. Ashes of Creation is one of the few games out there that has landed itself in a situation where I am praying they cut part of the game. But it has also landed itself in a situation where I pray for its success. Something that is few and far between nowadays in the current gaming industry. That was it from me today. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'm out. Peace.